In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional lands referred to as Treaty 4 territory.
These are the territories of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Michif Nation.
We respect and honor the treaties that were made on all territories. We acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, who live, work, and play on this land.
All right, I'll start it kind of low so that we can all sing together. 1, 2, 3. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true creator love, in all of us command, with glowing hearts we see the true north, strong and free, from far and Canada, we stand on thy holy, God, ye are glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on God holy. Oh, Canada, we stand on God holy.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
All together, please. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
All right, please have a seat. So it's my honor, it's my privilege to welcome back our Indigenous relative, Tim Poitras. Tim is a cross-cultural awareness consultant, fourth generation residential school survivor, a Sundance chief, knowledge keeper, and ceremony leader. Tim began a relationship with Notre Dame in September of 2021 with a desire to be of service to the Notre Dame students and faculty regarding truth and reconciliation and Indigenous cultural education. Tim was here last year with Brad on this very important day. Tim also came last February and March to speak with all the boys and girls respectively. Tim is a welcome member of our school community and will hopefully be a regular visitor to our campus. With Tim is Brad Belgaard, a member of the Little Black Bear First Nation and a nationally published journalist, having written articles featured in Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, Ottawa Citizen, Huffington Post, and CBC. Belgaard currently works as the Cultural Diversity and Indigenous Relations Advisor for the City of Regina. In addition to his professional accomplishments, Brad, also known as InfoRed, a nationally recognized hip-hop artist. We are grateful for the ongoing relationship that we have with Tim and Brad, and we are very fortunate to have them with us on this very important day, the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Please help me welcome Tim and Brad to Notre Dame.
Yeah, Father, what's up?
Hello. What's my words? That's all right. We're good right here. The song's about residential schools. My parents' first day at residential school. I was playing outside, just a little man, with the world in the palm of my hand. A little kid living life with innocence. I remember everything with images. A red truck and a man in a black robe. They told my mom, call him Father Joe. So they call him Father Joe. I saw a tear in my mother's eye. I let her cry, but I didn't know why. Piled up in the back of a truck, it had a flatbed on it and the road was rough. My head's a shaky feeling sick to my stomach. Where are they taking us? Who could have done it? My What is the purpose? What is the reason? Now I'm just a last little kid looking for my latest life that I live all alone. On the road that I'm traveling, and all I really want to do is just go home. I remember walking through the doors of the school, it was cool in September. They gave us clothes, put numbers on us where they said, this will be your name till you're home in December. They put a powder on my head, threw me in the shower with that light stuff for bed. They took a braid away. They took a braid away.
When I see you taken away, my heart becomes displaced. With broken shadows, no time for faith. I'll never see.
So this is what you call a common experience. Now first day of school, we all went to school for the first day, but this was a residential school common experience of that first day. Cold night, feeling trapped to my bed. I remember hearing whispers from the kids, whispers across the room, talking things like, oh, we're going home soon. And this is just the first night in my life. I think this is my worst night. I'm just a kid in the midst of my own real world. We get the jingle and the keys, we all lie still. I close my eyes to the pocket where I'm living with the image of a cloud that I'm sitting. I wanna fly away. I wanna fly away. I can't cry, can't sleep. They even took away your gift from trying to speak. I remember thinking that we never get to meet. Then my mind took it out, fell asleep. My first morning about food couldn't eat me from giving me punishment. This is the life that I had to live in residential school as a kid. Now 60 years later looking back, kind of funny how my mom remembers that. All the little things that I can't forget, but I'm thankful that I made it every step. And through the years, you felt too many fears for feelings of bitter, just enough to let into your ears. The elements of my tears are sentiment to the years that I spent with my peers. I remember. Okay, before I go to my next song, first we're gonna do a collective loud acknowledgement here. When I say treaty, you guys are gonna say four. Treaty, four. Come on, I think you guys from Notre Dame here. What's that? Treaty, four. Treaty, four. There we go. That's what you call collective loud acknowledgement. That's what we are right now. And when we think about what this day means, like from my perspective, this is how I look at it. Reconciliation. I went to Catholic school my whole life. We did reconciliation. And for me, reconciliation is actually making sure those bad relationships are better. So how many of you raise your hand and have had an argument with a best friend and you didn't talk for a bit, but now you're best friends again? How many, like, you have an argument with a friend, and then you make up, it's cool, like, okay, we're homies again. That's reconciliation. That's what we have to do collectively. So for you taking time out of your day to be able to listen to some stories of residential school survivors, learning a little bit about the history of Indigenous peoples prior to contact, that you're doing your part, man. Every day you learn something. So there's this circle that most people will say it's a medicine wheel, or everything's circular. So when you're born, that first moment you learn something. Can somebody take a guess at what's the first thing you learn immediately when you're born? What do you learn how to do? Was that in the back? Walk. Oh, you know how to walk as soon as you're born. Oh man, this guy's awesome, man. You know my best friend. You're right, we do learn how to walk though. It takes some time. We learn how to breathe. We learn how to breathe because you're living in the womb, so you live in the water, and it's like, we learn how to breathe this air. Right until the day that we die, that circle, we believe that we learned something. So you can make that circle of your life feel better by learning something to yourself, educating yourself. How many of you guys game? Who games here? Anybody play video games? No. Yeah, see? You remember when you first got a video game system, you didn't even know how to work it, you didn't know what you're doing, but you learned, right? It's the same thing in life. We've got to learn about each other's cultures. That's what makes a better society. So we're going to do another song right here. This song's called R.A.'s. If you don't know who he is, raise your hand if you know what Google is. Google it. RAs. That's your homework. Google RAs. Find out who this Native American war hero is. I'm like your counterpart, standing on a mountaintop of Mountain Heart. Speaking words with spoken word, my speech is art. Sounds absurd nowadays, so I feel apart. I feel apart. As I spill the words like liquid in a bar. I'm getting nervous, I'm gonna take you too far and start talking about some things I wish I never had to do, or things that I'm doing now, or things that I'm going through. It's like my mind's been darkened with tint. I still see bright, but it gets dark now and then. And negative forces of polarity make it hard to find clarity in a world filled with sin. There's a world filled with sin. While winners usually choose to lose before they often win. Tomorrow I'm usually snoozing when opportunity wants to get in. And my doorbell's always broken. Go figure that. Pass out on my couch, no money. Take this way that lifestyle, love, and our haze. These words are medicine for brighter days. Knock, knock, let us in. The medicine is here and it's better than it was back then. So knock, knock, let us in. Knock, knock, let us in. Knock, knock, let us in. The medicine is here and it's better than it was back then. So knock, knock, let us in. Yeah, I've reached the age where nowadays I like to reminisce. Not with animosity towards all those things I missed. Cause for everything that I missed, it wound up with a twist like not chasing my dream to rap. Presented me with a gift to understand what was, where I am, and how did I get here so fast when that wasn't even my plan? Another reason for me to make it and keep believing. Keep moving, continue to do what I believe in. Make music and use it to inspire some change. One song at a time, I'm robbing the radio pain, or my pain. I not create the same, but it's what we're living in, you know. It's the same. We can't change that, but we can change facts. Get our ass together and shift up the game fast. Slow down, hit reset, just get in the groove. You don't have feel good vibe, there ain't nothing to lose. There ain't nothing to lose, get on that feel good vibe. Knock, knock, let us in. The medicine is here and it's better than it was back then. So knock, knock, let us in. Okay, you hounds. I wanted to say thank you for allowing me to come and spend some time here and kick it. I see some young homies over here that I know. And I see a lot of you guys are like that future generation that's going to be able to create more change. So right now, it takes a lot of time for us to be able to explain what residential schools are when you guys are our age, decades from now. Right, Tim? How many decades? Like long, long time from now when you're his age. You guys are actually going to be that effective change. So I want to say thanks to you guys for inviting us out here, and hopefully we can continue to spend some time together over the next school year because, you know, I'm a big fan of sports, so invite me out. All right, thank you guys.
Can you guys hear me in the back? Yeah. I'm not used to using a mic. I want to thank these young ladies. My granddaughter's here that come and offer tobacco. When we're offering tobacco, we explain in detail exactly what we want before we get it, you know, we put it in their hands. I know when my late wife died, I wasn't in a good way, but I had to run many wakes and funerals. I'm fourth generation residential school survivor. I spent 10 years in that institution. How many of you know what dyslexia is? What is it? Properly. I'm dyslexic. I speak loud because I've got both of my eardrums broke on both sides from not getting it right in school. I don't like reading aloud because I go back to that shell as a small child. So when I'm reading something, I'm not reading for meaning. My late wife was an educator. She had her master's in ed psych. So I was a late bloomer as far as education. I left school with a complete grade 8. I was a big kid, but I was working, making paying my own way. My parents break up when I was 18 months old. So I used to, as an orphan, would help the old people make pickets, wooden pickets for their fence, make hay, weed their gardens for something to eat. But I also, some of them would pay me. I bought my own school clothes. For all of you who's wearing an orange t-shirt, I thank you because you're acknowledging a former student that when she went to school, that her mother bought her an orange t-shirt and it was taken away. She never seen her t-shirt. So even when I was a kid in school, there was a man from Indian Affairs come and asked us if we knew how many treaties were signed in Saskatchewan. Of course, they weren't teaching Native studies. You're being taught that now, so we didn't know. They asked us if we knew how many treaty nations were in Saskatchewan, and we didn't know. They weren't teaching us that in social studies. So he was talking down to us, kind of condescending. In our circles, when nobody's asking questions or looking at you, it was a sign that you didn't agree with what they had to say. But in a First Nations point of view, it was showing respect. We didn't make eye contact like this until much later. So having said that, I've endured many atrocities. The Pope apologizes to us this summer. It didn't sit well with me. His apology wasn't really meaning. It's like Harper when he apologized to Indigenous people for taking our rich, vibrant cultures with a language and way of life. He apologized just to the camera only. So it was like the Pope, they went to Europe and he apologized. He came to North America, he apologized just to the camera only. Only after the camera he started saying, oh yeah, I should have talked about genocide. Oh yeah, I should have talked about the divine right. So there was many things that were a missed opportunity. When Brad's talking about us having conflict, any one of us can have, that's true intimacy, have a disagreement, but we're willing to talk it out and work it out, and you're going to learn that through your sports, and you're going to learn that through life. That you're not always going to agree with people. They're going to have their own opinions, and that's okay, that's theirs. So the only thing I want to make sure that when we're sending this up is my prayer isn't a part of that. It's kind of personal to me. I don't mind sharing my prayer with you. But I'm here for a talk for your benefit. I'm going to be answering some questions. We only know what we know. And we don't know what we don't ask. So for the students that are going to be asking me questions, I'm cheeky by nature. I like to tease and have fun. That's how I survived those institutions for 10 years. They made me feel ashamed of who I was as a student. In French, they would call us les savages. But we didn't take long to realize what savage meant. So what they were calling us was little savages. So as I got older and started reading the dictionary, I realized the savage is a forest dweller. They get all their needs, their food, their clothing, their shelter from the environment. So after I realized what a savage was, today I'm proud to be a savage because I still harvest my own moose, elk, deer. We don't tan hides like we used to. We're all wearing modern clothes. In the old days, in a traditional way, you could tell a man's stature by the quill work his wife put on his shirts, his leggings. You knew his stature in the community by the feathers he's earned and learned, and how he was able to help people. Even the small children learn these things. Our grandmothers paid the brunt of colonization in the traditional worldview when the children were born. They were the ones that brought these young people into our circles. I want you all to say,"Mokainoja." Louder, come on, more pride. "Mokainoja." There you that's Notre Dame spirit. Well, Kainoja means child. We are all gifted children, and it's our responsibility to give them all the tools they need to become a responsible citizen. I was here last year for your grad, and I was blown away with the runners-up and their academics. 98 was a runner-up. So I'm looking at Kathy, that's a runner-up. I've never seen a 98. Even when I went back and I got a diploma in business admin, my highest score was an 85. I wasn't a scholar. We're not all scholars. But for you academics, I marvel at you. So I'm willing to spend a little bit more time. Whenever you're ready with the questions from the students, they can come up here and ask the students. I don't like using a mic if that's okay. I've got hearing damage, so my voice overcompensates. Because when I come in all excited about something, I'm going to tell my late wife she'd give me this. Oh, okay. So I had a good lady. She was well educated. She had her master's in ed psych. She had her education degree. She taught in Papal for 9 years. She was a vice principal of her own nation, Belgaard, which is carried a kettle. And she was also the director of education at Treaty 4 twice, the second time based off of her work. That's why Trudeau came to the Treaty 4 area. So with that, if we want to call up the students, they can ask me questions. You guys want to stand up? These benches are hard. I grew up on them. I got a flat ass. Go ahead and stand up. Stretch. And wiggle back. Oxygen back in that tailbone. All right. Sit down. Stretch one more time.
Saskatchewan, I'm a 4-year hound. Who's your role model and who have you looked to when you need support and guidance?
My role model was a weekly man. He's a medicine man. He's from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. His name is Sam Mooskamp. Him and his late wife was one of them that helped me become a more responsible man through a traditional lifestyle. I started learning about the pike. I'm a retired Sundance chief. I'm getting arthritis in my feet, my ankles, my knees. A broken ankle playing football. Now those things come back to like me. So he was the one that helped me shape me into a more responsible man. Good question.
Hi, I'm Alexis Lahr from Montreal, Quebec. I'm a first year hound. Why is truth and reconciliation important to Canadians?
Why is truth and reconciliation important to Canadians? We have over 7,000 unmarked graves at these former residential schools. When I was a kid growing up, does Notre Dame have a graveyard beside its school? They did. It's from the citizens here. Is it from any of the students? Okay, okay, these are villagers. But in these residential schools, the Canadian government wanted to bury what happened to these students. We weren't given names, we were given numbers. My very first day of school, I was LB, little boy, 21. I'm 62 years old next month. Don't ask me why I remember my very first number. names, and if it was the last name, Poitras. Good question. Truth and reconciliation, from our atrocities we paid in residential school, we're trying to create an awareness. You young people are the ones that are going to make change. Not your parents, not your grandparents. You're the ones that are our future that we depend on.
Hi, I'm Jesse Allen. I'm from Auckland, New Zealand. I'm a 3-year town. Should National Truth and Reconciliation Day be a provincial holiday?
It's a good question. Premier Moe apologized for adopting Indian policy. It was a Saskatchewan policy where they apprehended the children out of their homes and farmed them out through non-Indigenous homes, Indian homes. We have a child welfare system ready to implode in Saskatchewan. But just 2 of the provinces are making it a national holiday. When I was a kid growing up in residential school, to tell you students the truth, I didn't think I'd see this day where we're talking about residential schools. We're wearing orange t-shirts. We're thinking of those that have not lived to see the benefit of education. 48% of the students that attended these institutions did not live to see the benefit of education. So I think it should be a holiday, but I'm just me. Thank you for the thought.
My name is Eric Mullen. I'm a first-year hound from Calgary, Alberta. How can we as Notre Dame students support truth and reconciliation in our day-to-day lives?
And that's a very good question. How can you support truth and reconciliation? You guys aren't always going to be students. You won't be able to stop maybe racism from your parents or your grandparents. But you can stop stereotyping people. I sit on the homelessness initiative. We're trying to create homes for our less fortunate in Regina. Many of them are 60 scoop, part of the social services. Many of them are residential school survivors or descendants of residential school survivors. So there's a lost disconnect between their culture, their spirituality, their way of life. What we're dealing with today is a group of highly civilized nations of people that had a very complex way of life, a good way of seeing the world. We're doing a disruption where the superior thought, they thought they could reshape us into them, and they failed miserably. Good question. Did I answer your question?
My name is Brianna White. I'm a 4-year hound from Wilcox, Saskatchewan. What resources would you recommend for us to read or watch to build our understanding of truth and reconciliation? Any books, movies, or important people to learn about?
That's a good, very good question. One of the ones I'd recommend is Mind Glory and Arthur. Another one is Ward Churchill, A Little Matter of Genocide, and how all these systems work against us. Even in all these historical policies coming from Indian Affairs are here to contain us, to keep us oppressed. They don't want to see us take our identity back. They don't want to see us succeed. They want to justify their actions. It was a really good question.
My name is Owen Foreman. I'm a 2-year hound from Vancouver Island, BC. My question is, in your opinion, why did the government create residential schools?
In the United States, in 1738, the Choctaw, the Kiowa, the Seminole, the Rickera, and I forget the 5th one, it was just there and it's gone. They developed their own syllabics using their own language. So they realized that we could read and write in our own languages. The Cree have syllabics here. So what they call it, the rise and the fall of the 5 civilized tribes. But they were allowed to maintain their language. So ask me the question one more time. I forgot the other piece. How can I answer?
Why did the government create residential schools?
The government created a gradual assimilation policy. And this policy in Canada was to kill the Indian in the child and save the child. The United States had to kill the Indian in the man, save the man. The Canadian government and also the US government, when they seen these Indigenous people, they couldn't enslave us like they did with the blacks and many of the other Indigenous tribes that they went in and conquered and took over their countries. They realized our people could travel 70 miles in a day, even our grandmas, to chase the buffalo. Our old people didn't have gray hair like I have now because our diets are poor and we don't eat our natural proteins, natural foods. So it's important to learn all about this. We need to look back at our history of what we were. We need to talk about what happened so tomorrow we can have a better future. Did I answer your question?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That was a good question.
My name is Gordon Rose. I'm a first-year Hound. The question I have for you, if there was one thing we should take from this moment, what should that be?
From this moment, we should recognize all those children that didn't live to see the benefit of education. We should realize that those lives weren't taken for nothing. And from those atrocities, we should learn about how we can change it. Many of you students are going to go into RCMP, you're going to go into education, you're going to go into the healthcare, nursing, maybe even doctors. But you're going to be whatever you want to be, but you should always remind your children, your students, your peers of the atrocities. We're not included in the economy. They opened it up to immigrants a few years ago. A good friend of mine, he's gone now, John Hopkins, went abroad. They brought in a bunch of Irish immigrants. Right now we got a bunch of Ukrainian immigrants. They get a hand up before us. We're still at the bottom of the poverty line. We're not included in the development of Saskatchewan or Canada. So that's a very good question. Did I answer your question? Thank you. Good question.
My name is Wyatt Davis. I'm 4-year-old from Ottawa, Ontario, and my question is, what are some lasting effects of residential schools?
Lasting effects. I was colonized and rigid in a very rigid and negative way. In catechism, when we did religious studies, it taught us that the devil sits on our left side of our shoulder. My dad was left-handed, and they tied up his left hand, and he had to learn how to write with his right hand. I'm 62 years old, and when I lay down at night, when I first lay down, I have to lay down on my left side to oppress the devil and all these things. In an Indian worldview, we are the good and we are the bad. We're given choices. It was only the Europeans that taught us what sin was. We didn't settle down with anything closer than a third cousin. It was taboo to marry a close relative. From a European mindset, kings and queens, they married first cousins. So that was taboo in our world. Did I answer your question?
Thank you.
My name is Monica Rakovich. I'm from Pine Creek First Nation, Treaty 2 and Treaty 4, located in Manitoba. My question is, how can we break down negative stereotypes of Indigenous people?
That's a good question. We can go down to the malls, we can drive down the city of Regina. We see a lot of these people that didn't acquire education. They might have been raised in foster care. They might have been intergenerational impacts. Let's not stereotype those that are less fortunate. It wasn't their fault that they're drug addicts. It wasn't their fault that they're alcoholics. It wasn't their fault that they were poor parents. So when we're with our peers and you see somebody less fortunate, realize that that individual didn't successfully meet the threshold of colonization, assimilation. They didn't successfully complete the challenges life gives them from the superior bodies of government, education, in these types of institutions. Did I answer your question?
Chairman Welch.
My name is Megan Forsyth. I'm from Billings, Montana, and I'm a 2-year hound. The question is, what is the number one roadblock to fully healing as a nation, and will we eventually be at a place where we are fully healed?
We've got 110 years of colonization and assimilation. In the U.S., they only ran their residential school, Colorado, Pennsylvania, for 50 years and realized their experiment was failing. So, repeat the question one more time.
What is the number one roadblock to fully healing as a nation, and will we eventually be at a place where we are fully healed?
Hard work. More government. The Prime Minister apologized for what they did, the atrocities they did for Métis and Indian people, but they never put anything into place for mental health and anguish. A lot of these people are highly addicted. We looked at what happened to James Smith, Free First Nation, earlier this month. These young people were on drugs. They spun out and they're killing their own people. So my uncle, Brian McNabb, was chief when Harper apologized for that residential school policy, and he put $350 million in place for Indigenous people to bring in therapists or develop their own. I was a part of a 5-year research project, and it helped me understand the complex within my own families why my brothers and sisters were jealous of me. I was the first one to quit drinking. I was the one that went back to my spirituality and followed it. And I was the one that started from the things I learned through my traditional worldview. I started helping younger people. When Kate asked me last week or the week before last if she could talk, I was busy doing some domestic violence training in one of our First Nations for young people that are experiencing the difficulty of being in a relationship. So I'm using my own examples of things I had to overcome. It's taken us 7 generations to get to this point. It's probably going to take us another 7 generations to get to a healthier point. So it's people like you students here that are going to help us create a healthier place, a healthier space so we can be more responsible. Thank you.
I'm Josh Gerard. I'm a 3-year hound from Fort Myers, Florida. My question is, acknowledgements only go so far. What actions can our government do in supporting this journey?
I just spoke about the lack of parenting, the lack of communication, drugs and alcohol being an epidemic in our circles. I used to do blanket exercises with the RCMP cadets, and I was giving them some raw, uncensored data because this was 3 years ago before COVID, 4 years ago. I said, one day you RCMP might be investigating my death because already then the crystal meth was an epidemic. Nobody's doing nothing for these people that are caught. That's the only way they can feel happy. It's not their fault. They didn't grow up and say they wanted to be a drug addict. They didn't want to grow up and say they wanted to be a drunk. They're like you young people. They had dreams that were shattered by historical events and traumas.
My name is Jaron Miller. I'm a 3-year hound from Wilcox. And my question is, how will the financial aid from our government support residential school survivors?
This policy ran a full 110 years here in Canada. So that's 7 generations to get us to a point of dysfunction. I think the government, they can apologize all they want, but unless they start putting things in our circles where we can develop our own healing needs, We interviewed 300 residential school survivors from 6 different nations. We did some things called semantic therapy, using your own language, with Cheek to Win. My 3 granddaughters here. What Cheek to Win means people helping people through a mental, a physical, and emotional hard time. So these types of things need to be in place so we can learn about. When I did this residential school research, some of the students I went to school with stopped drinking and wanted to know more of this information. They wanted to know why they led a life of dysfunction. But many of them need to face their own fears, their own traumas, their historical traumas, identify it, and make change. Good question. Did I answer it?
Jackson Lesko from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. My question is, do you believe that the visit from the Pope has repaired the bond between the Indigenous communities and the Catholic Church?
For many it did, and for many it didn't. I'm a 4th generation residential school survivor. Even our modern chiefs don't realize our sacred objects. They gifted the Pope a war bond, a headdress. To me, that has spiritual meaning. If our modern chiefs understood what it took to wear a headdress, many of them wouldn't want one. Because when you're somebody that's put in that kind of position, you're supposed to give everything out to your nation and be left with nothing, because people will take care of you, meaning your own families. Not to criticize our modern chiefs, but many of them have a disconnect between their nations, and many of them have been colonized in a way where they don't fully understand their traditions. But it's not their fault. They're using words like chief. In the United States, they call them headmen. They use them here as counselors, headmen. But we need to go back. The Pope's apology didn't really mean nothing to me because he didn't really fully apologize on camera. He said, yeah, I should have mentioned genocide. Does anybody know what genocide really means? It's killing off a nation of people. In Canada, I try to say we're more civilized, but the Buituk were hunted to extinction. Shanadiki, she was the last Buituk speaker, was killed. They were paid so much for a female scalp, more money for a male scalp, less money for a child scalp. These are true realities of the development of Canada. I don't want to be all gloom and gloom. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I'm kind of a storyteller, so when I answer the questions, you got to extract the information. That's how our old people work.
Hi, my name is Rex Baxendale. I'm a 2-year hound from Golden, British Columbia. My question is, why do some people still refuse to support the Truth and Reconciliation Act?
Ignorance can't solve ignorance. In Fort Papal, we had a retired judge that said, oh, that's bullshit. There weren't Indian kids buried at these residential schools. And he's a well-educated man. So, when I'm faced with ignorance, we were skidooing up in Priestville, Saskatchewan, and we used to go to this place called Chris's Place, and it used to be a nice steakhouse. At the end of the ride, we'd have a steak and load up our sleds and laugh and visit about our weekend. But they sold out to immigrants. So these East Indian people bought the restaurant, and there was a urinal on the floor. And this farmer came in all gruff and said, geez, I've been in here 3 weeks, that urinal's still on the floor. So I'm trying to defend these immigrants. They're trying to make a business, and they're from India. I said, have you ever stopped and realized that in North America we have the most abundance of fresh water? but we also have the most polluted. In India, water is a precious commodity, and we just play with it. And then he looked at me and said, well, that doesn't answer my question. So when there's ignorance, it's target for that ignorance. Sometimes you just have to let it go and realize you can't change that thought. But where you can, I challenge you to try and change a healthier thought, as well as the rest of your students. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sam Bourgeois from Belgaard, Saskatchewan. My question is, how can we understand the history of the land we are on now?
How can we understand the history of the land we are now? What we have to realize, I was having a sweat last night, I'm going hunting this weekend, so I wanted to break with the animals we're going to harvest. And then one of my Métis relatives were sitting out there, he wants to work on, he's going for his doctorate in environmental studies. And he was saying, how come industry doesn't really care about the land we're on now? We look at Treaty 4, the Saskatchewan government is going in and harvesting all the potash. We're getting sinkholes because people are taking out the resources, they're not putting anything back, or they're not putting any compensation back. The De Beers Mining Company went into Wabascat. Chief Spence's nation, Shannon, was the one that made the Harper administration look foolish, so he sicked his watchdogs in there to rifle through their expenditures. And there were some discrepancies, but with all governments, there's money being spent not in the right way. So the De Beers Mining Company went in and they contaminated all the fresh water source as well as their sewer service. They did create jobs while they were there, but when they left nothing but pollution. Some of you young people might be going into science. Realize from an Indigenous worldview, we have to take care of the resources. The Saskatchewan government got big funds to dismantle these old mines, these oil wells. This man, he's going for his doctors in scientific engineering. We need to clean up the resources. I'm a grandfather of 10. I've got 3 great-grandchildren. I would love to be able to drive an electric car, but on our concentration camps, which are known as reserves, where am I going to plug in my electric car? There's 70,000 or better. I would love to be able to drive an electric car so that I can help make sure my great-grandchildren have an environment to live in. We're the ones that are going to be responsible. From an Indigenous point of view, how can we own this plot of land when that land belongs to our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, yes, to come? We're just stewards of taking care of these resources for just the time being. Good question. Go ahead. Help them up. Help them up. Stand up for a minute.
Tim, thanks. Old guy. I'm Rob Palmer, 32 years at this place, originally from Regina, but from Wilcox. Here's my question. You mentioned your spirituality. Could you maybe share with us one piece of wisdom from your spirituality that I guess we could implement or have impact on our lives?
I just want you students to know, my late wife and I talked about immortality. Do you young people know what that is? When we come to our last day here, it's not going to be, you can have a seat, I just wanted to get some oxygen in the backside. I have to get somebody out. My friend out here, the backside was creaking the bottle. But our own immortality is about the relationships we make. I'm here for you young people, trying to help you with another thought, another worldview. You can do that yourself. It's about the good things we create. great around us. From an Indigenous point of view, the Europeans wouldn't have been able to settle here should our chiefs didn't give up some of his daughters. But the Europeans were very abusive to our females. We have to realize the Europeans were burning their women from the 1100s all the way to the 1800s here on their shores. We had much respect for our females. Our females, each and every one of us, including us men, have been brought here through the spirit of a woman. So we need to love and respect our matriarchs, our grandmothers, our aunties, our sisters. You guys are away from home, so the guidance counselors, the teachers, the cooks, those are going to be your matriarchs that take care of you. Take care of them, and they'll take care of you. Did I answer your question? Good question. Any other questions?
Hey, my name's Jack Littlechild, and I just want to say thank you. Do you know my whistle? Willie Littlechild.
Not personally, but I know all of them. You've done good work.
All right, thanks.
Hey, you're a tall guy.
Yeah.
How tall are you? 6'6". Oh, it's supposed to make me feel like a big community. How tall this guy is? Oh, my man, make me proud, okay? All right. I thought I was a big guy at 5'11". I used to be 6 foot, and then all of a sudden I started growing this way, so my back. Any other questions?
Tim, I have one. I had the pleasure, I'll speak loud. I had the pleasure and honor of attending some of your ceremonies a number of years ago, and your wife. In the spirit of reconciliation, what ceremony would you suggest for our hounds to experience and to develop a deeper understanding?
Do you want to explain the ceremony you went to?
It was at your house. It was also at with kids for the Belgaard. The sweat was 4 rounds, and I remember you spoke of the elders that shared with you and developed you as an elder, and that the impact of right from tobacco and horse, and then just through prayer, drumming, and words that I don't understand, except for they had impact. And so then understanding the difference in male and female, when I went to your place and the sweat that your wife ran, and I was in with you, and the reasons for that. Yeah, just, and then you had the Sundance in that point, so, and I wasn't able to make the Sundance, but, yeah, so.
No, that was a good question. So you students, I get to know my relative here through working with young people at Dojak. What year would that have been?
96 to 2000.
96 to 2000. So I was working with young people. I worked with federal inmates. And many of our federal inmates really want to change their lives when they're incarcerated. Many of our youth really want to have a better life than being in foster care or Dojak. I'm going to share with you one story. This young man, he was from our File Hills colonies. At age 5, he witnessed his father kill his mother. He was through 34 foster homes. That was his 4th institution. That young man really wanted to come to the Echo camp because he heard I was running sweats there. So he worked the system to get out to the Echo camp, and then he was crying, wanting me to take him out to sweat. And I said, well, why do you want to sweat? He said, can I tell it in sweat? And I said, sure. The other staff were giving me a hard time. I said, he'll be my one-on-one. You'll take care of the other staff. We had a 6-to-1 ratio at that time. So I asked this young man, why did you want to come to sweat? He was crying in sweat. It's okay for us men to cry. Even when my wife cried, turned me into a little boy, I cried. 4 years I cried. I love my wife. I'll never have that again. given my age. So this young man said, "Tim, I witnessed my father killing my mother at age 5. And anytime the psychologists want to work with me, they want to come back and prompt and prod on that issue, but I don't remember it. The trauma was so great, it scared me. My mind is blank in that whole thought. I do not want to become institutionalized. If I end up back in here, I want you to kick my ass, Tim. You can really kick my ass because I want something better in life." And I looked at everybody in the sweat and I said, "Pray for this young man. He doesn't know what it is to come from anything. He never felt like he was a part of those 34 foster homes." So when we sang and we prayed for him and we opened the door, I told that young man, "You're going to be a good father." "Why is that?" "Because you know what it is to come from nothing. When you become an adult and have your own children, you're going to give your kids more than what you had." I seen that young man about 10 years later in Moose Jaw. I was at the spa with my late wife. New Year's Day, we'd go check in. This young man would come once a month and spend $100. And he said, Tim, remember me?" And after 10 years, I said, "No." He told me his name and then it clicked in. He said, "You told me I'd be a good father." I said, "Yeah, I remember that sweat." He said, "I'm a father of 2. Once a month with my extra money, I take $100. He was going into his 2nd or 3rd year electrician. With his $100, when he wins, he bought his kids extras. He was a student going to school in the winter months and working for the summer months. He was giving his kids more than what he had." So it was good that you reminded me. I don't know why I thought of that story. So I hope that young man, well, I haven't seen him since. But those moments, when you're facing those moments, if you can make a difference for one individual, you've done more than your share. Does that make sense, you young people? I didn't hear you. Yeah. One more time. Yeah. A hound, come on. Yeah. All right.
So that brings us to the end of our presentation today, Tim. I wanted to thank you for having the courage to share your sorrow with us and your wisdom to share your optimism with us. So thank you very much. One more round of applause.